Recently, I've seen some people accusing the Miami Heat's bubble success of being a fluke. They're frauds, and I couldn't disagree more, which I wanted to talk about in this video. And I also wanted to talk about some of the factors that have led to the Heat's struggles this season, because something that happens so often is people fail to look at the context. The Heat are the 11th seed, they suck. Tyler Hero is the most overrated player of all time. Eric Spoelstra should be fired. Duncan Robinson is better as a podcast host than a role player. All of these things have been thrown out. Like, genuinely, I've heard most of these things quite consistently outside of the Duncan Robinson podcast host thing, but there's still a large amount of people saying he's been exposed, and there are a large amount of people saying the Miami Heat are frauds, or their bubble run was a fluke, they're never going to get back to the NBA Finals, they won't even get back to the playoffs, all of these crazy things without even looking at the context, and we're going to go into that. Now, before I do that, if you could drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, that would be much appreciated. I make content like this every single day, and doing so does really help out, so that would be cool. But last time I did make a video on the Heat, so I won't make it too long about the context, because I have already clarified some of those things and why their slow start has been so slow. Let's just go over that, because it seems like it continues to grow every single time they lose a game, and people seem to lose sight of why their record is actually where it is. So let's start it off. The Heat start 4-4 on the season. Pretty standard stuff. A record of 500 would actually have them in the 5th seed in the East right now. That's how the East is shaping up. But forgetting about that, so after starting the season 4-4, here's when things get difficult. Protocol. Everyone's favorite friend, which we can't say the name of, hits the Heat hard, harder than a lot of other teams, and here's how the next stretch of games go. They lose the next 2 games to a 76ers team that had Simmons and Embiid, both of those games, while the Heat had to field a team without Butler, Bam, Dragic, or Bradley. They then split the next 2 games against the Pistons, playing without Bradley, Butler, or Hero. They then split the next 2 games without those same 3 players, so a record of 2-2 without 2 of their best players and a decent role player in Bradley was actually a pretty good result. However, having to play 3 consecutive games against the Nets and Nuggets without Jimmy or Hero was tough. They then lost to the Clippers without Jimmy, so in total, after starting 4-4 with a healthy team, the Heat proceeded to be without at least 2 of their best players for pretty much the entire next 10 games, and went 2-8 over that period of time. A number of these games were against the best teams in the league, by the way, who also happened to be healthy for the most part. That's just a bit of context. So after starting 500, they lost pretty much all of their best players for a good stretch of games, including Jimmy for the whole stretch of games, and went 2-8, leading to a record of 6-12. They then got back healthy and went 5-2 over the next 7 games. So if you're keeping track at this stage, when healthy, the Heat would have been 9-6. They then proceeded to lose to a flaming hot Jazz team. I mean, they've beaten every team in the league at this point in time and done so convincingly, so that's not really a bad loss. A Clippers team without Kawhi and PG. That was undoubtedly their worst loss of the season. And then to the Warriors, who they blew a lead to, another bad loss. And when you consider they were back-to-back bad losses, that's where some of the pressure starts to build up. You look at the record, you look at a couple of back-to-back losses, and all of a sudden, oh, they're a terrible team, they're a fluke, they're not playing good basketball at all, which to a degree, yeah, you can agree, they're not playing their best basketball, even when being healthy. When you consider, when healthy on the season, they've gone 10-9. Which again would be 4th in the East if you just looked at their record when they've been healthy. And it happens, you get injuries, but the Heat have had a lot, and it's really hurt them, clearly losing so many games, particularly early in the season, where they just didn't really have a chance with some of those games. It's one thing to lose 1 or 2 players, which they've consistently had out. I mean, Dragic has been out the last 7 games, Bradley's been out as well. That's fine. Like, you can deal with that to a degree, but it's another thing to lose 4 or 5 players at a time. You can't really do anything about that, and that's what Miami had going for them. So considering all of those things, when healthy, to go 10-9 and to be on the season 12-17, I don't think it's as bad as people are making it out to be. The Celtics are struggling, the Raptors have struggled, all of these teams have struggled, whereas Miami seem to be copping it worse, despite copying it worse, like literally having more injuries and having more things happen to them. So I don't quite understand that, but that's the reality of things over in Miami. But with all of this in mind, are they actually at danger of missing the playoffs? Because it's all cool to talk about how they've been screwed over by all of these things, but are they actually turning things around? Are they actually going to make it through to the playoffs? Well, firstly, we have to understand that the East, like I mentioned, they would be 4th if you looked at their healthy record, which says something about the East and the struggles of teams actually winning games. So to me, I think it's a no-brainer. If they stay healthy, they're going to make the playoffs. I can bank on that if they stay healthy, obviously. And we look at their last 11 games. Since they've got back healthy, again, they've still lost a couple of players during that period of time. but mainly they've had their core of players and they've turned it around defensively. They've ranked 5th defensively over that period of time, which a lot of that comes from the consistent presence of Bam, Tyler Hero, and Jimmy Butler. Why did I mention Tyler Hero, who's not a good defender? His rebounding has helped as well. He's actually a really decent rebounder for a guard. So you bring in, particularly Bam and Jimmy, obviously their 2 best defenders, and then someone like Hero, even these kind of players that can rebound the ball. And why am I mentioning rebounding? Because they were last in the league in rebounding prior to these last 11 games, where they've been 12th and turned from an average defense to the 5th best defense in the league. Rebounding is a key factor of defense. You look at some of the teams towards the bottom of rebounding, they're also towards the bottom of defensive rating. There's definitely a correlation, and we're seeing that correlation as the Heat seem to pick up the slack in that department, and their defense comes along with it. Another thing is just cohesion, communication, all of these things that can be lost when you don't have a consistent playing group. That's what Miami have had to deal with. They've had to deal with players consistently coming in and out of the rotation, and that can really throw off your defense. More so than anything else, your defense can really suffer as a result of just having so many different faces and having to deal with so many injuries over the course of the season. And it seems like as the Heat have consistently got their players back, their defense has gone up as a result, and I think it's here to stay. Now, offensively, their struggles have been a little bit more concerning because they're still towards the bottom of the pack despite getting players back healthy. In fairness to the Heat, one player that they have missed over this period of games, like I mentioned, is Goran Dragic, who is a huge loss, not just because he gives you 15 and 5, but he's also someone that can control the tempo of a game. And when you look at a game like the Warriors one where they lost, they blew a lead, they couldn't get anything going offensively in the last quarter. There's no doubts that Dragic, during that period of time where these guys are struggling, can create shots for himself and for others. So you add Dragic back to the mix and some of these offensive struggles go away. With this in mind though, Miami still aren't where they need to be as a team, and they know that, and we know that, given their star player, Jimmy Butler, is currently 31, although you could argue their franchise player is Bam, who's over 5 years younger. But with Jimmy at 31, the Heat are probably going to try and make a move, which people have talked about. I don't know how reliable these sources are, but people have discussed them making a move. Some Heat fans like the idea of Nemanja Bjelica. I'm pretty neutral with the idea of him. I think he's a good stretch 5. I don't know how much any of these trades move the needle, to be honest, but someone like a Rudy Gay could be really good, who's been linked. He had some size and versatility at the 3 and 4. Definitely more of an offensive threat than guys like Iguodala. He's a pretty consistent outside shooter, which is what you want because Miami love to get 3-point shooting from their 3s and their 4s to space the floor, and he's shooting a career high attempts this year on a good percentage. So I think bringing in a Rudy Gay or someone of that mold could help on the season. It might be enough just to help this team get back on track. Now, I think another aspect of the Heat's offensive struggles is the slight regression of Duncan Robinson. Now, clearly he's still lethal from beyond the arc, but last year he was unbelievable, and his gravity can't be underestimated for a team that has multiple non-shooters. A team that is really relied upon from his gravity, his spacing, his ability to just make tough shots consistently, not just his ability to create space, but just make shots, which he hasn't done at the same rate. And although he seems like he's still playing well, that slight drop-off can change a lot of things, and I think that's been more impactful than you would think just by looking at a 5% drop-off and a point here or there. So I think that's been a key missing piece. If he can get back to his best, that would really help their offensive struggles. You add Dragic back to the mix, if you could make a trade for a Rudy Gay, all of a sudden their offense is probably getting back towards middle of the pack, and if you can consistently be a top defense as well, all of a sudden that's much more like the team they were last year. In light of all these struggles, however, there have been a few silver linings. You've had someone like Precious Achiuwa who's played really well, and he's going to be a rotational piece going forward. Kendrick Nunn's getting back to his best as well. Tyler Hero's had more ball handling opportunity, and we may as well talk about Tyler Hero because I've turned into a defender of him, although my feelings on him are quite neutral. Like, I don't honestly care too much. I think people's opinion of him are just so far-fetched. When you look at sophomores in the league, who are actually playing better than him? Zion, Ja, and probably DeAndre Hunter, who's a great defender and a good scorer as well. Yeah, 3 of the top 4 draft picks from last year. But just look at what he's averaging. Just the raw numbers, 17, 6, and 4 on league average efficiency. He's a good rebounder as well. As I mentioned in the playoffs, he was good at doing that. He's 3rd for scoring among sophomores, 6th for rebounding, and 5th for assists. Sometimes that's all you need to look at just to prove a point. He's still doing very well for someone in his 2nd year. If he can tighten up his handling, become a more consistent playmaker and shot creator, then all of a sudden, yes, you probably have a future all-star on your hands. getting back to the Miami Heat and their offensive struggles, they're just struggles as a whole. Once you add back Dragic, and if you're able to get a Rudy Gay or someone along those lines, you get back Avery Bradley as well, who's been a tough loss because I really liked that pickup, who provided some defense, some shooting, all of those things. He was a great pickup. Unfortunately, he's missed a lot of the season. And then you factor in the re-emergence of Kendrick Nunn and even someone like Achua, who's played really well for a rookie. And all of a sudden, this team's looking in pretty good stead. Now, none of us know if this is good enough to get them back to the finals, but all I can say is from what I've seen, the team is getting back on track to a degree. They're definitely not playing their best basketball, but you do have to consider having to deal with so many injuries doesn't just hurt them while they're being injured, but it also hurts them trying to get back to their best, because continuity is something that's been so important for this Heat team for so long. That's a reason why they were so good in the playoffs, because they were just on that same level mentally and physically. At the moment, they've been struggling with that, so if they can get back to that, they add a few different players into the mix, all of a sudden, I think this team is definitely a playoff team and still a threat in the East. Like I mentioned, this has been a complete overreaction. Everything's been blown out of proportion. No one wants to look at context. Am I here to say the Heat are the same team they were last year? No, they're struggling, but so are the other two conference finalists aside from the Lakers. A lot of these teams are struggling this year. It's a more even NBA season. It's a short turnaround, and there's a lot of different factors that go into teams losing a lot more games than they would have last year. So I think let's chill on Miami Heat and their struggles and maybe look forward. If they get back to full health and they consistently struggle, then we can talk about that. But right now, they're a team that's been solid when they've been healthy and bad when they've been unhealthy. It's that simple when it comes to the Miami Heat. They can still make a move or two. They can still improve different aspects of their game and hopefully get back to their best. But they haven't been as bad as people have made it out to seem. Anyways, that's my thoughts on the Miami Heat. Have a good day. Bye.